The travel red list will be slashed to just 7 countries from Monday in changes announced by the government yesterday.
Meanwhile, experts are warning this morning that the soaring energy prices could push average annual bills through the £2,000 barrier for the first time. We're joined now by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, to discuss all these things. Good morning to you, Mr Shapps. Thank you for joining us. So some good news and some worrying news for people, as ever. Let's start with the good news, because it's always good to start with positivity. So we're shifting. Those countries have come off the red list. Travel seems to be opening up. And we're also getting rid of the PCR test so people can do a lateral flow test to come home, which, of course, will save them about £200 in testing. This is good news. Good news for the travel industry, of course. Good news for families who I'm sure will be looking to go away over half-term. Real concern within the NHS, though, of what this might do to COVID numbers. Are you prepared for a spike in numbers with the releasing of these countries and the lessening of the PCR tests?
We certainly wouldn't have been doing this if we thought it was going to lead to a spike in NHS numbers. So, first of all, worth saying it's a major step forward. Obviously, 47 countries off the red list, down to just 7 now. But also 37 countries from which we will recognise their COVID injections. So when people are jabbed in those countries, they can come here as well, which is another very important part, of course, for British tourism as well. But we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think it was safe to do. And we've taken all the advice of the medical experts before taking this important measure. We're very vaccinated in this country, obviously. Had waited for other countries to become more vaccinated. And now that they have, we're able to introduce this. But I should say it's only for travellers who are fully vaccinated that this much lesser regime applies. So you can't drop back to your lateral flow test from PCR unless the vaccination is there. So there's plenty of sort of security in place.
Yeah, important point to make. Lots of people will be wondering exactly when this is going to come into sort of play. Half-term for England and Wales starts about the 20th of October and then goes through to the end of October. I think the Scottish schools might be going on half-term already today. Can you give us a firmer date of when it's going to happen, or are you still not sure, actually, what date it's going to start?
Yeah, so my colleagues over at the Department for Health and the Home Office, who operate Border Force, are working very closely together to put this new system into place. It's not quite as straightforward as it sounds on the surface, because it requires changes to the passenger locator form, working with the companies, the private test companies, to do it. But I know that they really want to get it done for half term. So we should look out for further announcements from them in the coming days for that hopefully to be in place for half term, so people don't have to have the PCR test. The great thing with lateral flow, of course, is you know the answer straight away.
Yeah.
If it is positive, then you will still need to take a PCR test, but they're going to link that up so that you're automatically sent the PCR test if you end up with a positive lateral flow test. So the whole thing will be on the NHS when it gets to the PCR side of things.
Now, you've been very busy announcing that and looking at the detail of that. You've also, in position as Transport Secretary, been very busy dealing with the shortage of fuel that is appearing at the pumps, which 15 days in seems to be better in most places apart from London and the southeast. However, I think part of the problem is that across the board, this government seems to have been given warnings and not heeded them. So when you look at the front pages of the papers this morning, for instance, The Guardian talks about a report in 26 warning of where the government was warned of a need for tracing and more PPE, warnings from gas companies about potential shortage because of increasing costs there, warnings about energy prices not heeded. And I just wondered, when you knew personally that there was a problem with HGV drivers, how long ago was it? And I realise you can't train them overnight and you can't get them qualified overnight, but what steps did you do that day?
The problem has been endemic for years. So talking to the head of one of the most, of the largest, in fact, logistics organisation called Logistics UK, they represent more of the hauliers, the lorry drivers, than any other organisation. He said to me when he got the job 5 years ago, this was the first issue on his desk. So the problem's been there a long time. I've been acting over it for a very long time. But, and it's a big but, coronavirus came along and has caused a global pressure on HGV drivers, which stretches from America to Europe, much worse in for example, Poland, where they've got over 123,000 shortage in lorry drivers. So it's a universal problem. As the economies around the world have woken up, coming out of COVID, and in the UK, the economy growing very fast, the fastest of the largest economies in the world, the G7 economies in the world. And that has, of course, all exacerbated it. So it's been a long-term problem.
What we read, though, is that there are warnings from the Bank of England about inflation problems next year going to be worse than already predicted. Travel companies and transport companies saying deliveries are going to be a problem for Christmas. You know, so, yes, 15 days in, there are still queues at pumps in some parts of the country. But what is being done between now and Christmas to prevent that happening?
Yeah.
And is it, as you're arguing about this situation, too late anyway? Because many of the papers are arguing we're already in hock to Putin, problems with the French about getting energy anyway.
Yes, there's a lot of different things there. I mean, when it comes to lorry drivers, for example, we have had a very long-term problem that our lorry drivers have found that that the conditions haven't been great, the pay hasn't been great, but when we were inside of the European Union, free movement meant that anybody could come and do that job, and many people were happy to do it, perhaps with lower costs of living in their home countries, and that meant we could never sort out the long-term problems with lorry drivers here. Now the pay is going up for lorry drivers. We're seeing 1,000 people a day apply to become HGV drivers. And so we're going to be able to sort out those problems in the longer run. On the gas market, as you rightly say, another global problem. Russia seems to be at the heart of a lot of this. They don't actually supply very much of our gas. Over half of our gas is supplied domestically. A large part of the rest is from Norway. I think 3% from Russia, possibly. So it's not really a direct issue. It's the indirect increase in prices globally that is affecting people. Look, a lot of this is down to growing pains. We've come out of COVID. We got our population vaccinated, amongst the fastest, if not the fastest in the world for a major economy. And the economy is going sort of gangbusters. And some of these changes now as the world adapts post-COVID.
Who is feeling those growing pains? Sorry to interrupt you, but you're saying the same points that you know, that were displayed so vibrantly and comically by the Prime Minister at conference. Who is feeling those growing pains, though? Because it might seem manageable to you. It seemed funny in lots of ways at the conference. But actually, when you look at the front page of the Daily Mail this morning saying £2,000 is likely to be the average fuel bill, that is not funny to anyone here. The poorest are going to feel this the hardest. What are you doing about that?
Yeah, so, well, the first thing to say is we have a price cap in place, and that means that...
Which they've already said will have to be lifted next year.
Yeah, that's right. The price cap, I think I'm right in saying, is being lifted by 12%, where meanwhile the actual price of the energy has gone up by 250%. So you'll see that the price cap is trying to assist people in what is, as we discussed, a global market. But the government has tried to sort of step in to help wherever it can and be as proactive as possible. So, for example, the Chancellor announced a £500 million fund to help people, amongst other things, with their energy bills where people are in extreme situations. And the biggest thing of all, actually, if I may say, is the Prime Minister announcing that we're going to, by 2035, I realise this is a long way away still, but nonetheless, very fast, globally speaking, move to having totally renewable energy sources. And we're already, a long way there. So we're already producing huge amounts of our energy without relying on Russia, without relying on other countries. And I think that's really important for us as well.
There's some breaking news this morning, Mr. Shapps. You may not be aware of this just yet, but I'm going to share it with you now, that Insulate Britain have targeted a busy roundabout at Old Street, which you will know is in the centre of London. They've blocked a roundabout there with their latest disruption. These are some pictures coming from Greatest Hits Radio that they've posted for them. I wonder what your reaction is to the ongoing protests that Insulate Britain keep having on our roads, causing all sorts of trauma to people who are trying to go about their commute, and their challenge to try and get all those houses insulated. It's a continuing frustration for lots of people. They are fighting for a cause that they believe is the biggest cause, the most important cause that there is, that we are facing at the moment. But from the government's perspective, what can we do to enable them to stop having these protests, to stop causing the disruption for the thousands of people who are just trying to go about their commute?
Yeah, well, it's completely and utterly unacceptable, is the answer. Unfortunately, the laws are not quite tough enough, and that's why the Home Secretary has said that she will increase powers using the Crime and Police and Sentencing Bill. In the meantime, I've gone to the High Court, instructed National Highways to do that. That's the people who run our main roads, and asked the court for injunctions. Now, if people continue to do this, then they can go to prison and they can have unlimited fines.
It doesn't seem to be stopping them, though. We know you got the injunction for the M25. You're able to do that. They just shifted their attention to other major arteries. This is a major artery through the centre of London, of course. It's not stopping them. They're still going. They're still sitting down.
Yeah, well, we've actively been serving, or the police have, with the court papers to named individuals, meaning that people are putting themselves at risk and being sent to prison. The courts do not take kindly to being ignored when it comes to injunctions. You are, in effect, in contempt of court, and I hope and I'm sure that the courts will want to take that behaviour into account when they come up against justice. It is completely unacceptable. As you mentioned, I've taken injunctions which cover most of the southeast. I don't know the status of the particular road that they're on, whether it's local authority or under the national highways, but we are not content to allow this to continue. We'll continue to use injunctions, and ultimately we're going to change the law as well. This behaviour is selfish. It's actually dangerous, sitting in roads, needless to say, and it's completely counterproductive. Because if you think about it, the pollution that they're creating from traffic standing still is worse than anything else. So these irresponsible people who are gluing themselves, in some cases, to the road, must and will be stopped.
OK, Grant Shapps, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.